So I was actually lucky enough to get my hands on Season 5 before it actually arrived. Big thank you to EA for the opportunity, and today I'm going to be going through all of my initial thoughts for you guys, going over the new map Reclaimed, all of the new weapons, the change to the portal weapons, and essentially my thoughts on all of it. If you're excited for Season 5, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There will be plenty more content on the way now that I am back into the swing of things. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is that unfortunately most of the gameplay in this video is against AI. Obviously, the Australia-New Zealand sort of population for content creators is very small, so we were very lucky to be invited along, but there was only probably like 10 of us in this lobby. The rest of them were bots, so apologies for that. I don't really like using bot gameplay, but that is all we can really use, so just keep that in mind. Now, starting off with the new map Reclaimed, this is one that I've been very keen for ever since we got the initial like concept art, or it was pretty much a leak, I'm pretty sure, of a concept art image. And I will say straight off the bat, I've really enjoyed this map. Pretty much the same as all of the other maps they've added in each season. It is yet another solid addition, and very similar to Flashpoint. It is one of those maps that kind of has a little bit for each range, so if you're a sniper, you're going to enjoy it, and if you like using shotguns, you're going to enjoy it, and everything in between, there is something for you guys there. So that for me is a really big, important element of making a map. Not that I've made any maps in my life, but in terms of the maps that I play in any shooter, I feel like they need to have different ranges for different players, so that if you're not really good with close quarters weapons, you don't have to be forced into that, and that was definitely a big positive for Reclaimed. Now, really my only disappointment with the map, or with the design of the map, is more to do with actually the look of the map. It is a little bit more bland than I would have liked. That is a very nitpicky statement, so just keep that in mind. This is purely based on aesthetics, so this doesn't affect how it plays at all, but it is a very like bland and sort of dreary type map. However, that being said, it is also meant to be set in like a war-torn area, and that makes sense. It's not going to look all pretty when you're fighting in a war-torn snowy area, for example. So that is a bit of a nitpick there, but just because I think in that initial concept art it looked like a pretty colourful map, and then playing it, it actually felt pretty bland. But again, that is just aesthetics. It doesn't actually change anything about how the map plays. Now, the play session started off with Breakthrough. We got about an hour of Breakthrough, and then we moved on to Conquest. In terms of Breakthrough, I will say it felt very fun. You make your way pretty much through the entire map, which felt very good. And especially the first phase I really enjoyed, and then it moved into the second phase, which is in those two central buildings, which are the C1 and C2 flags in Conquest. And those are the buildings that you'll probably see a lot of gameplay from both me and any other creators who are involved, because that is kind of like the centerpiece of the map, I guess. But the first phase was really good before that as well. Then that second phase was really good. What I'll say is that the third phase, even though it actually felt very fun, I will say it feels very imbalanced to the defending team. Now, again, keep in mind, this is against bots, so it's never going to play exactly the same against bots as it would against actual players. And so this little nitpick here could be completely irrelevant when we actually get to play, you know, proper fully populated lobbies. But on the two games that I played, I actually got put on the attacking team both times. We lost both games in that third phase. You just could not get both capture points at the same time. We pretty much managed to get both, but it would be like we got the C1 objective and then we'd push over to get the C2 objective and they would take back C1. So I do think there's a little bit of an imbalance there, mostly because it is very open, so it's hard to like push across and take both of those objectives at the same time. And so I didn't actually progress any further through the map. I think that was the final phase, because I'm pretty sure the deployment was the next one, but I can't be certain on that because simply put, I didn't get to that next phase if there was one. So that's really my only issue with Breakthrough. It felt a little bit imbalanced there at the end. But again, I'll have to wait and see until I actually play fully populated lobbies to see whether that is the same against real players compared to mostly AI players. Now, in terms of Conquest, I will say that also felt very fun. Each flag felt very different from each other. Obviously, C1 and C2 are pretty similar because they're both in buildings, but all of the other four flags around the map, they felt very unique from each other, and it didn't feel like they were too far from each other too. So if you're at one flag, it's not like an absolute marathon to get to the next one. They are all placed pretty tightly together. Now, my only issue with Conquest, and again, this is probably more to do with the AI rather than regular players, is that it did feel a little bit empty in certain areas. Obviously, with the AI, they don't really congregate the same way that real players do. So, for example, in the C1 and C2 section, in full-on multiplayer, I'm going to assume those are going to be absolutely packed because it's the center of the map. Pretty much every map has those like one or two focal points that everyone's at. However, I was there and you know, there wasn't that many people there, mostly because the AI, I'd imagine, kind of dispersed themselves a little bit more evenly because they don't think like real players. They don't go, oh, the C1 and C2 flags are most important, let's get them. They just all kind of disperse pretty evenly across all the flags. So that was my only issue, but again, I think that was more to do with the AI. And again, we were playing on 64 players. If it was 128 players and it felt empty, then I think that would be a genuine issue. But 64 player lobbies on a smaller map, even if sometimes they do feel a little bit empty because they're so close to get to the next flag, it's generally not that big of an issue anyway. Now, moving on from Reclaimed, there was also the 3 new weapons added in Season 5. We have the new AR, which is called the BF2042, and this is actually pretty much from Battlefield 4. There was then a new sniper called the XCE Bar, and then the new Deagle, or at least I believe it's a Deagle anyway. It looks like a Deagle to me. I got hands-on with all 3 of these, and I had a fairly good session with pretty much all of them. I almost exclusively used these, except for the last game I used a little bit of the portal weapons, but I'll get to that later. As for the BF46, I will say it feels very solid. It feels very enjoyable to use. It didn't feel overpowered, but it didn't feel weak. Really, my only issue with the weapon is that it doesn't have like a high ammo count, so there's no ammo attachment that gives it like a 40 or 50 round mag, which for me is a bit of a bummer. I do enjoy having those higher rounds, which probably says a lot about my aim, to be honest, but lacking that, it obviously feels a little bit underpowered compared to some of the other weapons, just in terms of like trying to mow down enemies. But in just a regular gunfight, it felt like a very solid gun. It looks really good, it feels good, so yeah, another really solid addition in terms of weapons there. As for the new sniper, you guys will know I love sniping in Battlefield and just any shooter. This one feels very solid. It feels pretty much just the same, really, as the rest of the snipers, which is on one hand a positive and one hand a negative. On the one hand, obviously the rest of the snipers feel pretty good, so if it feels similar, then that's a good thing. But then on the other hand, I do like when snipers all feel very different from each other, and honestly this weapon just kind of felt not that different from like the SWS, for example, maybe the DXR. And so the only downside to that is that it doesn't feel that much different just picking this to any of the previous weapons, and so there's almost no incentive to actually pick it other than the fact that it is simply a new weapon. As for the Deagle, I think this is a really fun addition. It actually felt very solid as well. I actually had a few times where I was in a pinch and I pulled it out and actually managed to completely delete that enemy in front of me. So obviously as a pistol, it's not as exciting as the other two, but it is a very good addition as well. Now finally, just getting into like the smaller elements of the update. One thing that I noticed is that they have, and they talked about this, so it's not something that should be a surprise, but they've added AA guns, which is a really positive change to me. If I'm running around and there's a chopper and I don't have the loadout equipped for taking out choppers, it's really annoying that you can't really do anything about that. But now with the AA guns sort of placed around the map, just like they had in previous Battlefields, which is the part that was kind of annoying because they took them away. Well, they are now back, at least for this map, and they've added that to some of the portal maps too, and I'm pretty sure they've mentioned in the podcast, the Inside Battlefield podcast, that if it all goes well, they're going to sort of put these into the previous maps as well, in terms of the vanilla maps. So I didn't really get to use them on any actual aircraft, unfortunately, but I jumped in for a second just to see how it felt, and yeah, if you guys have played previous Battlefield games, it is pretty much the same system there. Now, like I touched on earlier, they did also rework some of the portal weapons. Now, not all of these are going to be in the game immediately. A lot of these are coming in update 5.1 rather than 5.0, but obviously they've talked about adding a lot more attachments, pretty much all the attachments from the actual 2042 weapons into the portal weapons, and then obviously the skins as well. I ran around with the A91, which is one of my favorite weapons from the Portal selection, and it felt absolutely amazing. It's so good to finally actually have some proper attachments to use, and then being able to slap a skin on it as well. It's a very small change, but for me that is a really positive change. So the Portal weapons that I used felt very good. Again, not all of these. I think we are getting about 6 of them, and I think all of them are actually ARs in update 5.0, but then we're going to get more as the updates come. So I know a lot of people are annoyed about that, but that is more for balancing reasons. If they just add a heap of attachments to every single portal weapon at once, that will definitely cause imbalances. So it is actually smarter doing it this way. Even though it feels like they're kind of drip feeding content, it is definitely better to do it this way. So we'll just have to wait for all of the other weapons. We did also get to see the squad management system, which is obviously a very small thing to actually show, so there's not too much to actually talk about, but all I'll say is it felt exactly how it should. This is another one that won't be in update 5.0, rather it will be in update 5.1, so another month or so to wait until we actually get that, but that is a massive change. I know when I try and play with my friends, it's honestly such a hassle to actually get into a game with each other, so this is definitely going to make that a lot easier. Overall though, the update felt like a very solid update. It pretty much feels like all of the other seasons where it is just a genuine upgrade on the game. It's nothing absolutely ridiculous, because obviously the lack of content in terms of only one map and only a few weapons. That brings it down a little bit, but everything about it is definitely a positive change, and so at the end of the day, it's still a really good update. And you guys can pretty much expect what we've gotten with the other seasons, just kind of each adding upon the game even further. For me now, I just really want to hear their plans for the future of the game. If you guys missed it, they did pretty much confirm there will be more like content and stuff coming after season 5, but they didn't say it will be season 6. So we could get season 6, 7, and 8 and round out the, you know, year 2 of content. Or if season 5 doesn't go as good as they want, maybe they'll just add like one final map and a handful of weapons as like a final package for the game, I guess. So we're gonna have to wait and see. I really do hope we get year 2 content, because the game is in a finally good state, and now if they just do the same thing they did with Battlefield 5, that will be pretty damn annoying, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm definitely keen to hear their, you know, fully thought out plans for the future of the game. I'm excited to be back into the Battlefield 2042 content though, guys. I know it has been very, very quiet here on the channel. I've had a lot of stuff going on in terms of the main channel and just a lot of stuff going on in life in general, but I will definitely be back into the swing of things now. If you guys haven't heard, I'm actually going to be bringing on a few editors across all of my channels, which is going to free me up to make essentially more content without having to do like stupid, unreasonable amounts of hours in terms of work myself. So finally, we should be back into the more regular content later on next month as I bring on my good friends Mark and Vic. So the dry spell for this channel is definitely long gone at this point, which is very, very exciting. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.